Hey YouTube, Untamed here. When it comes to trucks, Toyota has historically been the top dog when it comes to residual value, sustaining the highest resale value within their pickup segment, right? And whether it's the Toyota Tacoma, Toyota Tundra, even the off-road SUV segment has always done historically very well. The 4Runner, the Land Cruiser, the Sequoia. But I would comfortably argue that is no longer the case. Within the next couple of years here, we're going to see a pretty clear pivot away from Toyota being the resale king. I would argue that Ford and GM are comfortably going to pass Toyota when it comes to residual values within their trucks. I would even argue that Nissan, like the Nissan Frontier and the Nissan Titan, they are going to surpass Toyota when it comes to residual value. In today's video, I'm going to talk through the many reasons, stats, facts, and figures that really paint a clear picture as to why that's the case and what we can expect moving forward for Toyota. So stick with me. So for starters, you're going to see Toyota continue to beat their chest claiming that they have the best residual value within their truck segment. They're going to continue to do that because of their previous generation trucks. The previous generation, the third gen Toyota Tacoma with the naturally aspirated V6 does have an amazing resale because it came at a much lower price point compared to the current fourth generation Toyota Tacoma, and same goes for the Toyota Tundra, right? The previous generation Toyota Tundra came with the naturally aspirated V8, a very reliable, a very bulletproof V8 underneath the hood. Not to mention the starting price points of the previous gen V8 Tundra was much more bearable comparatively to the current generation that came out in 2022. Nowadays, we get a mandatory four-banger underneath the hood of that Tacoma, a 2.4 liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine underneath the Tacoma's hood, or a hybridized four-banger with the iForce Max. And now the Tundra, no longer do you get a trusty, reliable V8, you now get a twin-turbo 3.5 liter V6 underneath the hood. Nobody asked for that. Nobody asked for Toyota to overcomplicate these new platforms, right? But now we only get that and the hybridized iForce Max with the 3.5 liter twin-turbo V6 for the Tundra as well. They're overcomplicated. They're overcomplex at this point. People don't want that. People want to be able to pop the hood and work on these vehicles. Toyota has comfortably lost their three core values that has made their resale value so great over the years. That's reliability, simplicity, and affordability. They've always been those three things. Not anymore. And real quick, sometimes people will be like, hey, Untamed, why do you poke at Toyota so much? I love Toyota. It's my favorite vehicle manufacturer and it's going to continue to be, but I feel like we need to push back a little bit. We need to push back toward the manufacturer, get them away from all these changes that they've implemented. Normally, Toyota has always stuck to the Kaizen approach, that continual process improvement or continued improvement toward perfection within their vehicles and all their platforms, right? Which is why we see so many of their platforms grow long in the tooth, right? With that fifth generation 4Runner, how many years was that thing out? A decade and a half. That thing was out forever because they were continuously improving it, making small, minor adjustments toward perfection. And people knew that they could buy that 4Runner with the utmost level of confidence, right? They can buy that and drive it to the ground, drive it till the wheels fall off for 250,000 or 500,000 miles as long as they perform that maintenance on it, right? But not anymore. Nowadays, the price tags have shot to the moon and they're over complex. They're too complicated. There's too much technology involved, and well, they've gone too far and they deviated too much from those core values. Toyota, if you're listening, if you did pivot back to introducing a naturally aspirated V6 and a naturally aspirated V8 into your pickups and your off-road SUVs, I guarantee it, you're going to see a large spike in sales, but more importantly, you're going to see your true Toyota enthusiasts come back to the brand. So many people are leaving the brand. Obviously, you're going to continue to sell because you're going to keep pumping out these vehicles, and people will think, oh, hey, Toyota, they're reliable, right? They have a great reputation, without doing their homework and going out and buying these new generation vehicles. They're going to continue to sell, right? But you have lost that core audience that's going to stick with the brand for years, decades, or more amongst their families. And we talk about it plenty, so I won't beat it to death in this video, but we have seen Toyota move production of the Tacoma entirely to Mexico. Originally, it was split between San Antonio, Texas and Mexico, kind of a 50-50 split, but now it's entirely built out of Mexico. So that kind of rubs people the wrong way because Toyota does save over 80% in labor cost alone paying Mexican employees down in Mexico comparatively to paying Americans here in Texas, right? So they save a ton of money, but they still hike the price tag up 20 to 23% across the entire lineup of Toyota Tacomas when they transitioned to the fourth generation here in 2024. So they hiked up the price tag all while saving tremendously in labor costs. That rubs people the wrong way. You know, the whole quality of the build quality of, you know, the fit and finish, panel gaps, You know, the rattling on the interior, a lot of people complained about that with the new Tacoma here. A lot of issues with the transmissions, of course. People are just kind of fed up with the lack of quality, all while the price tags were shot to the moon and requiring you to have a four-banger underneath the hood. True Toyota enthusiasts don't want a tiny displacement turbocharged four-banger in their Tacoma. Let's face it, Toyota is resting on their laurels. All of their previous generation vehicles right now are what is continuously allowing for high residual values. These new generations here are not the same. They're totally different. And because of that, these resale values are going to suffer. The new generations here, they're already coming with tremendous discounts. For the Toyota Tundra in particular, you can get anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 off various trims. Even the TRD Pro model. The TRD Pro, the top dog, TRD Pro is now selling at invoice across the country right now. I follow a number of Facebook group pages for the Tacoma and the Tundra, and well, they're coming at invoice often. And even then, they're struggling to sell them because they overpriced it. They stuffed it to the gills with technology, and they overdid it. Right? When the previous generation 2021 V8 Tundra TRD Pro cost $54,000, it is absolute blasphemy to have now asked about $78,000 up to $82,000 for that new generation Tundra TRD Pro, right? If you get the performance package or whatever it is, right? They have overpriced it, and that's abundantly clear when you look at the sales figures. Obviously, the price tag is a huge part of the problem, but if Toyota did introduce that 5.7 liter V8 back into the current generation, the now current generation Tundra, tell me in the comment section, would you consider buying one? And tell me truthfully. Obviously, it wouldn't change the price tag much. It'd likely still be the high 70s for like a TRD Pro Tundra. Would you consider buying it? Tell me the truth. If it had that 5.7 liter V8, if it kept everything else the same, the body, of course, the turning radius is garbage, let's face it. I've owned one, so I'm speaking from experience here. It is terrible compared to the previous generation Tundra, but they kept everything the same, put a V8 in it. Would you honestly consider it? Tell me the truth. Same goes for the Tacoma. Would you consider buying a current generation Tacoma if it had that naturally aspirated V6? I mean, I tell you, I would consider buying. I like the look of that new Tundra, or the new Tacoma. The new Tundra kind of has a little bit more of an overbite. I actually appreciate the look of the Tacoma over the Tundra. You guys tell me what you think. And when you look at the Tacoma pricing now, so many of those platforms are now selling at invoice, even sub-invoice in many cases. A lot of the new Tacoma's various trims are coming with a $6,000 to $10,000 off discount, obviously depending on which trim it is. They're struggling bad to sell those. Even the Trail Hunter and the TRD Pro models, they're sitting collecting dust on so many dealership lots right now. So if they're coming with a $6,000 to $10,000 off discount, what does that tell you? That tells you Toyota overpriced it out of the gate. People don't feel comfortable spending that kind of coin, $70,000-ish about, for a Trail Hunter or a TRD Pro trim Tacoma. It just feels sickening. If you go out and get a limited Tacoma will cost you about $60,000. Absolutely absurd. Time out for a second. Do you remember what $60,000 and $70,000 would get you probably the highest trimmed, highest spec, full-size, heavy-duty diesel pickup truck? It really wasn't that long ago that you can go get a Platinum or a King Ranch stuffed to the gills for that $60,000 to $70,000 point. Now what do you get? A four-cylinder Toyota Tacoma. How about that? Before some of you take to the keyboard and say, well, it's not their fault. It is emission standards within the United States, and it's the EPA regulations and restrictions that are forcing the hands of Toyota. They had no choice. They had to do this. They had to make smaller displacement turbocharged motors and hybridize everything. They had no choice. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Not to mention, for starters, President Trump has now kind of dialed back EPA regulations and restrictions. So that's already kind of out of the picture. That's no longer the case, which is why we see brands like Ram bringing back the Hemi V8 that technically went away forever last year, right? But now they're bringing it back because they realize that the Hemi V8 is a pivotal part of that brand at large. Toyota can do the same. They can bring back the V6. They can bring back the V8. They absolutely can. Obviously, the astronomical price tags of these new generation Toyota trucks is a big part of the problem, right? That combined with the lack of peace of mind that people are getting with them. We've all talked plenty about that large safety recall with the main crankshaft bearing for the Toyota Tundra. That gave that Tundra a tremendous black eye. Although Toyota claims it's no longer affecting the new generation or the new models, a lot of people are reluctant to buy them, and for good reason. I don't blame people at all. They left debris within the engine bay during production of a number of their Tundras, right? And because of that, it ultimately led to engine failure on so many of those platforms. So people are just nervous to spend $70,000, $80,000 on a truck that might just fail on you and leave you stranded. Don't blame people at all. So obviously, the price tags and the lessened quality are the driving reasons that are affecting the residual values of these trucks. However, let's talk about one other factor that I think is going to become critical as we move forward. Although Toyota has always overproduced many of their platforms, they've always sustained that high residual because they were extremely reliable. Reliable, simplistic, and affordable. I'll keep saying it, guys, but those three things is what allowed Toyota to develop such a huge fan base, a huge amount of loyal consumers following the brand for decades amongst their families, right? But that's gone. So one other factor I think to consider now moving forward that's really going to hurt the residual is the fact that they massively overproduce these vehicles. Let me give you some figures just for the midsize segment, just for fun here. So last year for 2024, Toyota sold 192,000 units for the Toyota Tacoma. 192,000 units, okay, last year. Previous to that, with the previous generation Tacoma, they sold about 235,000 units. And they've always kind of teetered between that 200 and 250,000 Tacomas being sold each and every year. That's kind of been the average throughout the last decade or so, right? But now they're really trying to pivot more into their Mexico production out of their Mexico plants, and they're trying to increase production moving forward. They want to ultimately get to producing just under 6,500 units per week. Per week, okay? The actual number is 6,480 is what they're wanting to shoot for. That will allow them to produce up to 337,000 Toyota Tacomas per year. So again, like I mentioned before, that was okay when they were reliable, simplistic, and affordable. But none of those three things are applying right now to these new generations here. They're no longer simplistic, they're no longer reliable, and they're certainly no longer affordable. So if they're already coming with these large discounts right out of the gate, of course they're gonna be terrible when it comes to resale, because they're gonna be everywhere. Everyone and their mother is gonna have one. And I say GM and Ford are gonna have higher residual values because their production rates differ, right? Just for that midsize segment, last year, like I mentioned, 192,000 Toyota Tacomas were built, 98,000 Chevy Colorados were built, 68,000 Nissan Frontiers, 46,000 Ford Rangers, 45,000 Honda Ridgelines, 42,000 Jeep Gladiators, and 38,000 GMC Canyons. That's the competition there. The next in line, they were about half the production rate of the Toyota Tacoma. And quantity of production normally is a huge indicator of what the residual value will be on most vehicles, right? Take the Land Cruiser, for instance. The 200 series Land Cruiser, it was always really expensive, right? With the Toyota Land Cruiser Heritage Edition, they built 1,200 units per year in 2020 and 2021, so 2,400 units in total. That low production rate is what is allowing those high residual values today. Because there are so few of them produced, that's why we're seeing so many of them come at a higher than MSRP, original MSRP price tag today used. Let that sink in. And don't take it from me. Do some homework, do some research online. I just looked up and saw some General Motors products, a Chevy Colorado, for instance, a Chevy Colorado ZR2. Those resale values are remaining extremely high. Already a year or two old with 15 to 20,000 miles, and they're still wanting dang near the original MSRP for them. And a large part of that equation is the lessened quantity of production, right? Like I just mentioned there, a lot less of these Colorados are on the road. So you don't have a market flooded with these platforms. And same goes for Ford. Much comparable to the Chevy Colorado ZR2 and ZR2 Bison, look at the Ford Ranger Raptor in particular. 2024 models, now a year and a half old, with 10 to 15,000 miles or more on them, are only just a few $1,000s less than their original MSRP. Original MSRP is high 50s, sometimes just teetering over 60 grand, but you can get one with 14, 15,000 miles on it just for about $56,000, $57,000. So great residual coming from Ford. I personally believe the Nissan Frontier and the Nissan Titan are going to be holding a much higher residual value as we move forward, for similar reasons as to why we see previous generation Toyotas perform exceptionally well on the used market, because they do sport a very simplistic feel and naturally aspirated platforms, right? In the Nissan Frontier today, you can go get a 3.8 liter naturally aspirated V6. They did away with the Nissan Titan last year, so that 5.6 liter V8 that we got in that was last of its kind for that platform. No longer do we get that option, right? But I do firmly believe if you go out and buy a Nissan Frontier Pro 4X, MSRP is right around $45,000, give or take a couple thousand. You can easily get it to low 40s, maybe even high 30s. You'd be sitting pretty well in a few years, especially if Nissan does what Toyota did and gets rid of their naturally aspirated V6 and pivots toward a turbocharged four-banger, right? So Nissan, I do firmly believe, the truck segment is going to do better than Toyota. And take a look for yourself too. When it comes to Toyota trucks, the 2022 and onward Toyota Tundra, go look at their resale values right now. Go look for a 2022 Toyota Tundra, right? Any trim, any spec, SR5, you can go get a TRD Pro. Go look how much they want for them and look at their original MSRP. They're not selling, and they're not selling well because, well, the brand new examples are coming with pretty tremendous discounts, right? So why go buy a used one for a little bit less than what you can go buy a brand new one for and get it maybe an incentivized interest rate on a new example comparatively to buying used, right? So used examples of even the 2024 Toyota Tacoma, they're flooding dealership lots too. They're flooding CarMax lots because people are quickly wanting to pivot back to what they know and love. And that's a naturally aspirated V6 Tacoma, so they're going back to that. And KBB, Kelley Blue Book, will still say that Toyota Tacoma, the Tundra, the 4Runner, they're going to be among the top 10 highest residual value vehicles because they're looking at the previous years. So keep that in mind. So they're not suggesting these new generations are that. So don't be tricked into believing that if you go buy a new Tundra, you're gonna have a great resale, because you won't. So Toyota has pivoted toward that throwaway business model, right? You can produce these throwaway vehicles, throwaway trucks that will run great. They're gonna be phenomenal for a few years, 3 to 5 years, and then maybe stuff will start going wrong with it, and then the consumer will have no choice either to do a significant repair to that vehicle through the dealership, have the dealership get paid out for it, or trade in that vehicle for a new one. So that is kind of the old school throwaway vehicle approach that honestly we do see from domestic vehicle manufacturers. Ford, GM, they're kind of notorious for it. Ram as well, right? Stellantis at large. But I never thought we'd see the day that Toyota pivoted toward that. They're no longer focusing on that long-term reliability, and it's abundantly clear. They want to maximize their revenue, maximize their profits as much as possible, lessen the quality of these vehicles to where you have to trade it in. And that's a shame to see. The thing that has allowed Toyota to be so successful up until this point is because I think they truly focused on reputation over revenue, rather than the other way around, rather than revenue over reputation. By building up that amazing reputation for this brand, that brand loyalty for true Toyota enthusiasts, well, they're your mouthpieces, right? That's the mouthpieces for Toyota, talking amongst their communities, geeking out on YouTube about it, loving these vehicles for being reliable and simplistic and affordable. Those are the people who really have proven to be these brand advocates, right? And they have propelled Toyota to where they are today. Even though maybe enthusiasts don't make up a tremendous part of their consumer base, those are the people keeping the heartbeat of the brand alive, I would argue. And let's face it, vehicle manufacturers like Toyota only pivoted toward these smaller engines, turbocharged engines, hybridization of everything because they receive government handouts. They're called carbon credits that the US government will hand to these vehicle manufacturers by just pivoting away from larger displacement motors, right? That's what they've done historically under previous administrations. But now, with us reeling back the EPA regulations and restrictions, now no longer are they receiving those types of benefits and handouts. And a lot of you will claim, well, my smaller displacement motor, my turbocharged motor, hybridized motor gets way better fuel economy. Look at the Tundra. Look at the Tacoma. They barely get better fuel economy compared to their previous generation naturally aspirated platforms. Barely more. I'm talking like 1 to 3 miles to the gallon better than those old generations. Not to mention, these smaller displacement motors are going to be working harder. Ask any mechanic. I won't pretend to be one, but any mechanic will tell you when you lessen the engine size and strap turbos to it, you're making it work harder. You're making it wind up like a wind-up toy to produce those figures. Sure, they're up in the horsepower and torque, right? You can read the brochure all you want and get excited, but you're making it work harder, lessening the lifespan of that engine, whether you want to believe that or not. So ultimately, even if they are saving a little bit when it comes to fuel economy, what are they ultimately doing? They're forcing you to swap out and replace that engine more frequently over the lifespan of the entire chassis, the lifespan of that vehicle, right? So really, it's more harm to the environment if you want to look at it that way. And I won't open this can of worms in this video, but do some research, do some homework on what goes into the extraction of minerals needed to assemble and put together these battery packs that are strapped to these hybridized vehicles, right? Do some homework on it. What is actually going into those batteries to go into these vehicles, and then what does that disposal process look like? I'm not going to bore you to death in this video, but I think you might be alarmed with what you see. Let's just say just because you're getting a little less smoke and a little less exhaust out of your tailpipe doesn't mean you're necessarily doing better for the environment. Out of sight, out of mind, I suppose. Obviously, some of you think that I'm just beating a dead horse here, but I do firmly believe if we keep sounding the drum on this, maybe, just maybe, Toyota will listen. Maybe Toyota will be like, you know what, let's see what happens if we do put that V8 back in that Tundra. Let's just see what happens. We'll see what happens. You know, stranger things have happened. You know, like I mentioned before, Ram is bringing back their Hemi V8 that they technically did away with. They eradicated it from all their factories, and they adjusted their assembly lines to make sure that they weren't putting in that V8. But now, well, with the revision of the EPA regulations and restrictions, now they're like, you know what, that's a big part of our brand. Let's bring it back and let's see what happens. So I applaud Ram for doing that. Let's see if Toyota can do the same. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think I'm being too critical of Toyota? Honestly, tell me. I am hopeful for Toyota, and I would certainly consider buying one of these new trucks if they did offer a naturally aspirated platform. Even with their higher price tags, I would still consider doing it at this point. You tell me if you would do the same, honestly. So thanks for watching as always, guys. If you appreciate this type of content, please consider liking and subscribing. Eventually, this channel will be large enough to the point where, well, Toyota will have to listen to some degree, right? Let's try to get there. Thanks for watching as always. Until next time.